When I was 13 years old, I got to spend the summer with my grandparents on my father's side. Where my grandparents on my mother's side were kind of down home, we didn't have special dishes for Sunday meals. My grandparents on my father's side, well, we had those special dinners, and the plates and the forks. And I had a problem when I was 13 that I like to eat with my fingers a lot. And my grandmother was just abhorred that I ate with fingers at 13. She worked for one of the government agencies in the DC area. And so she had this behavior modification plan where I was going to learn how to eat at a restaurant appropriately, and then I would get to go to a special lunch at a hotel with the other girls that she worked with. So for months, I practiced putting that napkin in my lap and keeping one hand in the lap and using the fork. And after a month of all those things, keep your elbows off the table, don't speak with your mouth full, you know those rules, right? I earned the chance to go to the fancy restaurant in the hotel near the office and have lunch with the girls. That's really what she called them. They had fried chicken. And I found myself trying to figure out how I could eat fried chicken with a knife and a fork. And I'm sitting there, and the ladies are picking up their chicken and they're eating it with their fingers, and I am struggling. Until finally she says, "You can use your hands." We have rules, right? We have rules. We know that when we go out to eat, we do certain things. We have rules about how we behave with one another. And really, Jesus is setting some rules, and we're having that same thing in Hebrews. The first verse of the Hebrews text was, "Love one another as brothers and sisters." Jesse was practicing that last night, and he said, "Oh, I don't know about that." Because some of us don't have that really love relationship with our brothers and sisters. Sometimes our brothers and sisters of choice are more precious to us than the biological ones. But the Hebrews text is inviting us to love one another, to live in community with one another. And then the Hebrews text says, be sure to welcome people. Give hospitality to strangers. We're not talking about like, "Oh, hey, how are ya? You're new, I recognize you, hi. I need to say hi because that's what we do at church, hi." Right? No, it's radical welcome. "Hey, good to see you. Come, let's wash your feet. You must be hot and tired from your journey. Are you hungry? Can I get you water? Can I get you..." You know what I'm saying? Welcome strangers. Treat them with radical hospitality because you never know. They might be an angel. And there are biblical stories through the Hebrew scriptures that talk about angels visiting people and announcing, "Oh, you're going to have a baby." Angels visiting people, God's going to do something here. And fortunately, the people who entertained them well, treated them with respect. That's what we're supposed to be about, is welcoming people with radical hospitality, that they feel welcomed and loved and valued and precious. That's what the Hebrews text is saying. And then Jesus goes on to say, when you're throwing a party, be sure you invite the people you wouldn't normally invite. You know what I mean. In our daily lives, in our work lives, in our business lives, we tend to have engagements with people, right? We'll have dinner parties, or let's go to lunch. And we all know what that means, right? For some people, when we say let's go to lunch, it's just like, "Hey, I want to make a connection with you, and you're never going to call me, and I'm never going to call you, but we're going to talk about one of these days we're going to go to lunch," right? Am I speaking truth? that happens, right? And then there's people that when we say, let's go to lunch, we actually go to lunch, right? We get it on a calendar, and we find that we're engaging and hearing more and bonding and creating community with. Those are good. But Jesus says, when you're doing a lunch, don't invite someone to lunch that the next time they pay for your lunch, which is kind of how we do that, right? I'll pay this time, you pay next time, or we split the check. Don't invite somebody who you can count on to be able to buy your lunch. Invite someone who can't possibly buy your lunch, so that it's not an expectation that you get a lunch back. Does that make sense? It doesn't really function within our social construct, does it? But that's what Jesus is saying. Don't look for the person that's going to buy you lunch next time. Invite the person who can't. Debbie Thomas says that Jesus insists on this because this is who God is, the great reverser of our priorities, our hierarchies, and our values. Because there is no end to the game of who is in and who is out. And God, in God's wisdom, knows that our anxious scramble for greatness will lead to nothing but more anxiety, more suspicion, more loneliness, more hatred, and more devastation. Because God's kingdom is not a kingdom of scarcity, it is one of abundance, where all are already welcomed, already loved, already cherished, because the currency of the kingdom is humility, not arrogance, generosity, not stinginess, hospitality, not fear. When we live out the kingdom of God, we know that we have plenty to share in our fellowship time, that we don't need to worry about if we invite an extra person to come, because there'll be enough. When we live out radical hospitality, we know that we can invite someone that's not in our normal circle of friends and family, because we don't need to be afraid of them. I found myself looking at this text and going, who's here? Who's here? And then, who's not here? Who are we missing in our community? Billy Honor reports that in the United States, there are 47 million people living in poverty. 47 million in poverty. And that means not that you're living paycheck to paycheck, which some of us are. It means poverty, where you don't have enough food, or you're not sure you're going to be able to stay in your house. And I don't know about y'all, but I think we're missing some of them. I don't know that we have any members of our church who are wondering where their next meal's coming. And we're missing them. They should be here, right? They're our brothers and our sisters. We're to be welcoming them, right? And if they're like just kind of hanging out in a park today to try to make their hunger pains go away, we're not being radical and hospitable, are we? Another statistic is that 24 million women live below the poverty line. That's extreme poverty. Single moms. They tend to be poorer than single dads for some reason. Maybe it's that pay gap or something. Single moms. Single parents. Single people who are entrusted to trying to raise children, and they have to figure out, can I afford to buy this child a new pair of pants or a new pair of shoes and feed them dinner tonight? Where are they? Where are they? They're brothers and their sisters. They could be angels that we could be entertaining, and we're missing out. And let's look at our racial diversity. We're missing people. And you know people who are racially diverse, right? You know people who are not just white or African American. We know people, right? But they're not here. Why not? Why not? We have a Sunday coming up, September 18th. You could bring them. We'll have a big fellowship time. We'll all be friendly. We'll be on good behavior. It'll be a great time. Choir's going to sing awesome music, right? Just a suggestion. One of the joys of my life was when I first began to get to work with the bridge. I'd walk through the dining room. And you know what I saw? It was like a taste of heaven. Because it didn't matter what color your skin was. You sat with people with different skin colors. It didn't matter what your sexual orientation was, because we were all in this together. It didn't matter if you didn't have enough money to buy a cigarette. Although I'm not encouraging smoking. It was sharing. When I hung out at tent cities, I experienced a sense of community that is what I think the early church experienced. Where people looked out for one another, they knew one another, they accepted the faults of one another. George, he's been drinking for a little while. Just sit down, lay down, George. That's really what they said. I don't know about you, but I hunger for that level of community where people, yes, know my warts and my scars. And I know their warts and their scars. And it's okay. That is part of the kingdom of God, in which it doesn't matter what I look like, it doesn't matter what I smell like, it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter how I speak, it doesn't matter anything other than I'm accepted and welcomed. And through the grace of God, I'm fed. That's what we're called to be. That's the foretaste of heaven to come. Because at that moment, everybody's there.